We're just now starting to get a reputation and show up in articles and things. But yeah, there's some trophy fish in there. There's no doubt about it.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Today, our guest is Evan Dowdy, owner of High Country Anglers in Johnson City, Tennessee. Evan is a longtime guide on some of the best tailwaters in North America and beautiful eastern Tennessee, and he's here to tell you about them. Evan, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So let's start off with, tell us a little about your background. How did you get into guiding, and how did you end up in eastern Tennessee?
Well, I actually went to college in the mountains. I went to Western North Carolina and then Appalachian State. Well, when I was at Appalachian State, I got introduced to the tailwaters of the Watauga and South Holston River in East Tennessee. I'd never really experienced tailwaters before. You know, I did a lot of freestones, small streams. So when I encountered these, it was just a big door opening. It was just great. I was in heaven.
Yeah.
Well, I saw a couple boats going down this river, saw a couple of guides, and I knew guiding was an opportunity. And I thought, what a neat way to work and be out on the water, be outdoors, be where I love trout fishing. You know, might as well make it work. And it's not work for me. I thoroughly enjoy it. But
that's fantastic.
Yeah, my dad suggested working in a fly shop. You know, so I started working at Desi Brown's in Charlotte, North Carolina. I kind of saved my money, bought equipment, got a website going, and just kind of headed in that direction. And it worked out really well for me. I've been guiding now for 18 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're darn good at it too. I know in 2018 when we fished with you, you did a really nice job for us. We did really well.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So these are tailwaters that you're fishing out there, right? So there's two biggies, right? The South Holston and the Watauga. Tell us a little bit about those two rivers.
Well, they're both bottom release dams that hold up a lake, Watauga Lake and South Holston Lake. The dams are generally about 300 feet. So when they pull this water, it's always constantly cold water at the bottom of the lake there. And another great thing going for these tailwaters is that they're limestone too. So we get a real high pH with it being a tailwater and limestone. And as it comes out through the turbines, the water oxygenates the rivers. You know, the South Holston has a weir dam also to help with extra oxygen. So it just really makes for a great trout habitat and ecosystem. The bugs love it too. Bugs like a high pH. So if you've got the food, you'll have the fish, you know, to follow.
Right.
So
I see. That's great.
Yeah.
And what are the differences, would you say, between the South Holston and the Watauga? Like, what days do you go to one versus the other?
Well, you know, it can be just tax dependent. You know, during the time of year kind of determines that, and the flows, like the low water versus high water flows. I generally float the South Holston pretty much only on high water. It's hard to get a boat down through there, and you don't want to interfere with wade fishermen either when you have to push a boat through shoals and stuff. So the Watauga on low water, you can manage to get down a lot easier. It's known more for floating on low water, but both can be floated on high water. And it's just hatch dependent, you know. It just depends on what the bugs are doing and how the fish are reacting. And you can always go to one or the other and catch fish, but one might be fishing better than the other, you know, in that certain time frame.
Yeah.
So, you know, as a guide, we just stay on it and just have, you know, day by day, we know the fishing conditions and adjust.
Okay.
Accordingly. So
I gotcha. That's great. So I had read that there were something like 8,000 fish per mile in the South Holston, and
yeah,
that's eye-popping, isn't it? And
it
then
is.
6,000 fish per mile. Yeah, in the Watauga. How are these rivers supporting such massive fish populations? That's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. It just goes back to that habitat. Just there's so much food in the water. The water's just super, super healthy. You know, it's rare to have a tailwater and limestone combination. You know, you hear about limestone streams and then you hear about tailwaters, but to have tailwaters that are limestone tailwaters, it's just, you can't get much better. And the food, the bugs just thrive. We've got scuds, we've got mayflies, caddis, midges. There's something coming off every day. You know, the midges, of course, are a daily kind of hatch, and the scuds are readily available. So, you know, the food is there.
Right.
So they naturally reproduce. They don't stock browns at all in either river, just because the brown trout, they reproduce on their own and thrive.
I've heard the South Holston is famous for this sulfur mayfly hatch. Can you talk about that? Is that like a May hatch, or when does that happen?
Well, yeah, it depends on water, like kind of the temperature. As you know, low water, you can get an earlier hatch like in May. The one that's really known is when it kicks on the high water in the summertime. And towards the end of May, June, July, even into August, we get this prolific hatch. Like when and it's best when it's the heat of the summer day and they turn on this cold generation, and it's like a formula that the bugs just love. I've just seen them pour off. We do have sulfurs on the Watauga too, but not like the South Holston. That particular bug just does really, really well on the South Holston.
Okay.
And the Watauga is just more diverse in its hatches, it seems like, especially as you get further down and you get changes in the water temperature, you know, that's due to outdoor temperatures.
Okay. I remember when we fished with you, our start time was at 9:00. And I was thinking, why in the world are we starting at 9:00? And you said, you know, not to worry. There's a reason for it. Talk about start times and why you might start, you know, like fishermen probably think you need to start at 7 a.m., but you're starting at 9 because of the flows, right?
Yeah. Generation kind of is ultimately the determining factor. And another thing is trout are very much a visual eater. So, you know, getting out there when it's dark isn't necessarily the best thing. You know, everybody thinks, you know, the earlier the better sometimes, but that isn't always the case, especially with trout fishing. They use their eyesight a lot. That's their number one sense for eating. But flows are a huge determining factor, and just the bite in general. So, yeah, we just kind of know, kind of through experience and just staying out there when the better times are.
Right.
So we'll adjust, you know, to that.
Gotcha. And you've pulled some big fish out of these rivers too, right? I was looking at your website, highcountryanglers.com, and your trophy gallery, and there's some really nice browns and rainbows on there.
Yeah, we like fishing it here. We've got a prolific fishery for sure. It could be compared to any Western waters, I would say. We're just now starting to get a reputation and show up in articles and things. But yeah, there's some trophy fish in there. There's no doubt about it.
I saw that the record brown trout out of the South Holston was 42-inch, 21 pounds. That's a monster, huh?
That's unbelievable.
Is it one of your clients that got that?
Well, no, unfortunately. I wish.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. That's great. Well, now you take people of all ages fishing, don't you?
Yes, I sure do. Yeah, we take kids all the way up to, adults, families. Everybody's invited.
Okay. And so you've got this teaching newbies how to fly fish. You got that one down, huh?
Yeah, I sure do. And I enjoy doing it. I like teaching and kind of explaining, and then watching people go through the process and then catch their fish on fly rod. To see their excitement is great.
Yeah.
It really is a good feeling.
Like what would you say your mix is of, you know, brand new fly fishermen or new fly fishermen compared to people that have got some experience and need a guide to float these tailwaters?
It's a good mix. I probably get more repeat clients now. So I'd say probably maybe a quarter of my business might be new people, where 3/4 are repeat anglers. Just because the trip is so fun, people come back. You know, your avid anglers love the float trips.
Yeah, that's right. And so because these are tailwaters, it's kind of nice to be in a boat, right? And have a guide, because if you're in the water and they start generating, the water can come up pretty suddenly, right? If you're waiting.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's nice to be fishing from a boat, right? So I imagine a guide is pretty important in these waters.
Yeah, floating is a great way to do it. I call it the luxury fly fishing. You cover a lot more water and just catch more trout for sure. Wading is fun. Wading, of course, is a great way, but floating, you definitely need a guide, and you can just really have a great day.
Right. And it really doesn't matter what the flows are necessarily, right? I mean, if the water's running really hard and high, you can fish that. And if it's dropping, you can fish that. And do you try to catch the wave? Do you want the water coming up or dropping down? Does that matter at all?
Yeah, I kind of, if they're going from low to high water, that first initial push for it's about 15 minutes or so, you get a good bite. And then it's best to kind of let it settle for a little while, maybe take a break, eat lunch, something like that, and let it just kind of settle in, and those fish kind of get in other feeding lanes. So we fish it differently from low to high water. The low water, we go right for the main flow, where high water, we're looking for the edges and seams, where it's not quite as turbulent. So the fish kind of relocate a little bit.
Okay. So they're moving around as those flows are changing during the day. Those fish are moving around then.
Yes, they'll move according to the flows, because it just gets a little too turbulent. Although trout love current, it can be too turbulent. When they generate, it gets kind of powerful. So you just make adjustments, and both can be very successful. You just have to adjust your depth of your indicators and flies and your weights to what the fishing conditions are.
I see. Well, walk me through the seasons down there. So because it's a tailwater and that water's always clear and cold, you've got fishing opportunities all year long, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right. And that's another neat thing about tailwaters is that water temperatures stay constant, I would say, through the first 5 miles of the river below the dam before air temperature starts to affect it. So, I've been out there where it's, 5 degrees, frozen islets and blue-winged olives coming off and fish rising. It's kind of a paradox. You wouldn't think it would be, but it being a tailwater, you'll see steam coming off the water. The water just stays, that constant 50 degrees.
Huh. And
the trout they love that. They can eat year round, and just a very good comfort level for them.
Okay.
So there's another benefit.
So in the spring, it's probably pretty good time to fish. Tell me what you're kind of doing in the spring versus midsummer, fall, winter. How's it different in the seasons?
Well, the hatches kind of change a little bit. The spring is probably where we get our biggest hatches, our initial hatches, and a diversity of bugs. Especially as you go further down the river, you get more diversity in bugs. But closer to the dam, you get more of that constant water temperature. So you'll get fewer species, but you'll get a lot more of that species. But, you just change your tactics a little bit from spring to summer. Summer, we use a lot of terrestrial patterns and midges. But, you can still see blue-winged olives hatch in the summertime or wintertime. It just depends on the temperatures, really, of the air and water. Whether it's cloudy or sunny can make a difference. So we just keep our eyes open and always have all the flies with us. Every fly, species. That way, if it does come off, you're ready. You got it. And I just keep my eyes peeled and do what the fish are doing. I know what bug's coming off. I can tell by looking at it.
Yeah.
And then I'll make my adjustments,
Okay. I got you. So you said something interesting that downstream, the diversity of the bugs is greater than it is up near the dam. And is that because of the water temperature?
Yes, it is. Certain bugs do better at different temperatures. At that cold temperature of 48 to 50 degrees, blue-winged olives do really well with that. Sulfurs can do good with that. But as you go further, like especially on the Watauga, once you get down, you start getting other creeks that come in and rivers, and then you get a warmer temperature or a colder temperature, depending on what time of year it is. And with that, you get a more diversity of bugs, caddis, big caddis, stoneflies. So, you got to really have a lot of bugs down there on the lower end. Up top, blue-winged olives, midges, you can fish those year round.
Is it more, are the hatches more dependable upstream or downstream?
Yeah, I'd say downstream, the spring, that's really where that formula comes into play, where everybody says spring is great. Yeah, you really notice that spring hatch down low, like big bugs, a lot of them, caddis mayflies, just the whole gamut coming off. But up top, you get more of an annual hatch. Those blue-winged olives seem to come off a lot, and the midges are always coming off.
Okay.
I think it's just that water temperature staying constant. It gives you a constant hatch, you know, or little smaller bugs, it seems like, up top.
Okay. So if you were sort of preparing a client for, you know, reality, you know, hey, you're coming out here to do some fishing, this is probably what you'll experience. Would you be saying, look, we're probably going to be nymphing most of the day, but if we see some hatches, we'll switch? Or are there some days where you're just out there throwing dry flies all day long?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. You know, I do nymph fish or have a nymph on if I don't see a hatch coming off, and always looking for a hatch, you know, and make my adjustments with dry flies. Some days you're just throwing dry flies and that's it. If you got a hatch, like a steady hatch.
Right.
Of course, that doesn't happen all the time. Probably, you know, 10% of the time we'll have dry flies on and have those epic kind of days. But, you know, 90% of their food's taken subsurface. So
there you
a lot
go.
of times I'm net fishing or dry dropper. Great way to do it is with a dry dropper. You know, you cover both levels there.
Right. Right. What kind of nymph patterns do you like? Are you usually throwing a pheasant tail, trying to imitate a mayfly, or what are you typically throwing?
Well, that's always a good one. That's a classic, you know. I'll try to make little change-ups on patterns like that.
Mm-hmm.
We use UV flash a lot of times, UV thorax on a pheasant tail, something just to have a little extra to it, you know, a little traction to it. They are fans of UV for some reason, the UV flash.
That's interesting.
I'll use an assortment of that. Sometimes I'll make mayflies that are just all flash, you know, you know, and they can have their moments too.
Right.
But a pheasant tail, I mean, that is a standby. That's a great one. And I'll change bead colors, copper, silver, gold, you know, and,
okay.
you know, give them something they're not seeing all the time. Make little changes like that UV thorax on a mayfly, or the pheasant tail. That's a really good way to go.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, in some parts of the world, flash isn't good. You know, like if you go up to Michigan, fish the Osable River up there, they really don't like a lot of flash on those flies up there. And, you know, that's just a different type of fishery, right? It's more of a freestone, spring-fed fishery up there. Then you come down to your rivers in Tennessee and, you know, you got to put a little flash in there. I remember fishing the Nantahala River in North Carolina, and same thing. They like a little flash on them in there. So do you suppose that's just part of tailwater fishing, or is that just something that's kind of unique to your area?
You know, it's something that we have used out here for sure. It might be unique to our area. I notice on low water, like summertime, like August days, they might steer away from the flash, you know. But we've got quicker flows a lot of times than a freestone. So you can throw like a fly that has a little flash in there, and, you know, in that fast current, they'll just react to it a lot of times.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll have a fly that's all flash, sometimes just a little bit of flash, and then sometimes nothing, you know, just the natural, like you say. It just depends on the pressure of the fish are getting, you know.
Right.
If it's a catch and release fishery, you got more educated fish, you know, than you do like a stocked area or, you know, a low pressure fishing area.
Are these rivers catch and release?
Well, you can catch and keep. We practice catch and release just to conserve the fishery and continue the great fishery. You know, we like to promote catch and release. So that's kind of what we offer is a catch and release guide service. Just keep the great fishery going. You know,
it's your livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I like to protect my business partners if I can.
Right. Your business partner. I love that. That's great. Someone once told me if you want guides to take you to their best spots, don't talk about keeping fish. If you want to go to average and below average spots, then start asking guides if you can keep a few.
Yeah, I generally take people to hatchery supported waters. I don't usually keep them out of, I never keep them out of the tailwaters just because it's such a pristine thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, hatchery supported freestones or stock trout, yeah, you know.
Let them keep them.
Don't mind keeping those, but.
Keep a few. Yeah. Well, if you were to pick, you know, 3, 4, 5 must-have flies for these tailwaters, what would you put in your bag?
Well, going back to that pheasant tail, I tie like a Quasimodo style, or just like it's kind of a curved shrimp caddis hook. I mean, I always have a 16, 18s in that, just your pheasant tail with the UV thorax. And then I'll change bead colors, copper, silver, gold. I like tungsten. I use tungsten beads.
Okay.
And then your tried and true zebra midges, I carry an assortment of grays and purple, actually. Purple is kind of like the new black for us.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're using purple instead of black a lot of times, like a dark purple thread. And, you can rib it with different wires, different size wires, depending on the size zebra. But I'll fish those from 16s to 20s, real tiny.
Okay.
And have some, I mean, that is a great pattern.
You got good eyes, don't you?
Well, yeah, you got to have some good vision there.
Yeah.
Because they get tiny.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I was asking you earlier if you took people from all different ages. And so you started to tell me before the show started here that you took a guy who was 80 years old fishing. And I was wondering if you could tell that story to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This was a really neat situation. I thought I kind of chuckled at this at the end of the day, into the trip. But anyhow, I had a trip with an avid angler. He'd been fly fishing all his life, years, has a wealth of knowledge, 80-year-old fella. So I was making sure as a guide, not only is he rigged and not tangled and he's fishing in the right areas, but I just wanted to make sure he was sure-footed as well. So I kind of walked with him carefully up and down the river, in fact, having a hand on him a lot of times to support one another, really, and make sure he doesn't trip and fall. But anyhow, we hooked this wild rainbow in this small stream, Stony Creek, and it takes off upriver. I would say, gosh, it would have to be, 25 yards or so. I mean, it got there in no time.
Nice.
So this guy used his drag and did everything right with his experience, Then the thing shoots down below us, boom, just as quick as it did running up. And so, and we're walking down river with him a little bit, and I'm going to net this thing, and he kind of slips, and I'm running back up to grab him. And he said, "No, don't you worry about me. You get that trout." Because it was
he handed you the rod?
No, he said he wanted me to net that fish. He wasn't worried about him falling in. I was trying to come up there and grab him from slipping and falling in. But he was more concerned about the fish than his well-being almost, It was really quite a moment, because when I saw him slip and kind of fall a little bit in the river, that caught my attention more than the fish almost, because I want safety, safety.
Yeah, liability. Sure.
But he had other intentions, He said, "Don't you worry about me." Yeah, we got him. It was a 20-inch wild rainbow. So, just a triffy trout, and it's not stock trout, So they fight harder, they look better, So it was really something to see his reaction.
Yeah.
When we're out
that's
there.
really interesting. I bet that's a little bit of why you like guiding so much, Evan, is just to look on people's faces, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. To see that excitement and joy. And each day is an adventure. It's different. It's not always the same,
Right. Well, speaking of adventure, tell me a little bit about, to be a good client. Tell me some things that a good client should do and maybe should not do when they come fishing.
Most people are pretty good about everything. That's another neat thing is everybody's coming out to have a good time and not stress or get too nitpicky with things, but showing up with the right gear. Like it's always good to have rain gear with you.
Mm-hmm.
Polarized shades, ball cap, come prepared, basically.
Yeah.
With some of the, essentials there. Not necessarily, you don't need a fly rod or reel. We've got that, but, just some of the smaller things, like if you get burnt in the sun, bring sunscreen. Of course, we've got a lot of extra stuff too, just in case.
Right.
But, just coming prepared and looking to have fun. We adjust
Right.
According to the angler's abilities. We take out beginners to advanced. So, we know there's different levels. So we make our adjustments to the
great.
anglers. You got a fishing license, but
That's a good one.
we try to take care of everything. We provide a lunch on the river on the full day trips and bring snacks and drinks on the half day trip. So yeah, we pretty much got you covered.
Oh, that's great. Do you have some tips for anglers who are looking for a guide? Say if I've never been to, it could be really anywhere, right? So what really should you be looking for when you're trying to find that guide to take you fishing for a day?
Well, you want to get somebody that has experience on the rivers. I think some outfitters might hire like younger guys because they can take more of a cut off the top,
I
so to
see.
speak, and you'll sometimes get a little more inexperienced guide, that way. So you want to make sure you got a veteran guide, ideally, that kind of knows the waters really well.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure you talk with the guide, make sure you get along, make sure his temperament's good. Some guides are more intense than others. So I try not to be that way. My ultimate goal is to make sure we have fun.
There you go.
It's something that should be enjoyed, getting in the outdoors. People are coming out to have fun, relax, and some people want to fish harder. You make those adjustments. But,
Right.
you just want to make sure you got a veteran guide that you get along with. Maybe have a conversation with them beforehand, before the trip.
Okay.
And tell them kind of what you expect in the day. And they should make adjustments to that.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. If you were to, say somebody walked in a fly shop and you happen to be in there and they were looking for a guide service or, maybe they're going out on their own, but if you could just give them, one or two tips that would really help them be successful on these rivers, what would you tell them?
Well, I would say, come prepared with an assortment of flies, the proper flies. We would try to get you on the right bugs, even I don't mind giving a few out if somebody's coming up and fishing one day on their own or a couple of days on their own. I don't mind giving flies in different assortments, but, having nymph rigs rigged up, dry droppers, always nymph fish unless I see bugs coming off, or a hatch.
Yeah.
Now in the summertime, I'll use terrestrials, crickets, beetles can be effective, but having an assortment of patterns, I always start out nymph fishing unless I see a hatch.
Okay.
I go back to that 90% of the food is taken subsurface. So that's a huge percentage. And they won't come up unless there's a hatch really coming off. Tailwater fish won't.
I see.
They're not as opportunistic as your wild trout.
Okay.
Or low pressure fish.
And with it being a tailwater, they're going to want to check the flows too before they go jumping into these rivers. These rivers can get big, right?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely want to check your flows, which is tva.com. It gives you your different lakes and dams there. They also have a phone number. I don't have that offhand, but there is a TVA phone number, and there's also a TVA app that you can get. And they generally have the schedule out 3 o'clock prior, previous day. They don't give you a whole lot of notice, but they'll give you a day before notice.
Okay.
And they're usually pretty good about it, but they do change the flows periodically, and they can fool you sometimes. So you always want to be cautious out there for sure. Paying attention to your surroundings, always, keeping an eye on the water levels is a good idea.
Yeah. And because it's a tailwater, I mean, honestly, the best thing to do, and not just because I'm talking to a guide, but really the best thing to do, if you can afford it, is get a guide, right? Because if the water's coming up, you're fine. If you're counting on waiting, spending a 3 or 4 day weekend in Eastern Tennessee and you're counting on waiting, there may be, periods of time where you just can't do it.
Yeah, waiting's very difficult on high water. In fact, really just not recommended. It's dangerous, really.
It is, yeah. Now, there are some small streams in there because I remember you dropped some pins for us on our iPhones, and I brought a big group of people down there, and we kind of spread out in the evenings, and we fished like the Upper Doe, a couple other streams. Can you mention a few other those streams on air here?
Sure, yeah. The Upper Doe's one, and that's in Roan Mountain State Park.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a delayed harvest regulation too. Recently changed to delayed harvest. There's Laurel, which is good outside of Hampton. Then we've got the Doe. I mean, not the Doe, but Stony Creek. Stony Creek's
Right.
a really good one. The Beaver Dam is close by, also a great little creek. So there are options,
Okay.
if you come out and they are generating and the water's too high to wade, there's a select spots in the river, like in those flats, where you might be able to wade some on high water. But for the most part, going to these smaller streams is a great alternative.
Yeah. And they are pretty little streams. I tell you, we had a great time on those little streams. I mean, just absolutely gorgeous, crystal clear.
Right.
We really enjoyed our time on those little streams in between guided fly fishing. Well, Evan, how can people get a hold of you?
I've got a website. It's highcountryangler.com, highcountryangler.com. And my phone number is area code 704-641-6815, 704-641-6815.
Okay.
But, I update the photos on the photo gallery. I got a link to a Facebook page on my website too, where I just give after every trip, I try to post a little shot, a snippet there,
Sure.
kind of showing what the fishing's like. Yeah, we can definitely take care of you if you want to come down here. We've definitely got some prolific fishing, Western style trout fishing.
You bet.
Yeah, man.
With a lot of fish. Okay, well, good. Well, listen, it's been great having you on the show, Evan. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And please, if you can, if you enjoyed the show, please consider a like, a share with your angler buddies on Facebook or Instagram, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much, and we'll be back again next week. Our music is by a great band called The Brothers Fountain. These are friends of mine from Colorado.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.